And in third reading, of course, we're speaking to the anticipated effect of the Act once it's been passed. I mean, it's no secret to anyone that's read the Hansard or followed the archival video from last night that I brought forward a number of amendments. That's not to say that I don't agree with the principle of what's been presented in the Act. I just think the way the Act has been drafted is not creates as much possibility for harm as it creates possibility for doing good. And I wish that the government, in supporting the sponsor of the bill, had chosen a way that did not throw the net so wide, that didn't capture every single Albertan as part of going forward. I also I live in a society which is governed by permission. We willingly acknowledge that there's a set of rules that we all agree to abide by, and we all agree that we will have paid people put in positions of authority to implement those rules upon us. It's by consensus. We agree to this. So I don't want anyone running around there saying that I've got some kind of a hate on or that I've got a problem with police forces. I don't. I live in this society. I approve of that. I agree with that. However, we are also living in a society where increasingly we are losing control. Indeed, it can be argued we've lost control of our personal information. It's now being held by so many different sets of government agencies, private entities, that we don't know who's tracking our movements. We no longer really have the ability to go about our lives without being under surveillance in some way or shape or form, including, as I pointed out last night, with my iPhone. And I'm a big Apple fan, and I love using my iPhone, and now I find out they've been spying on me and tracking everywhere I go and every time I stop and for how long I stop. And all of that information is duly kept. And of course, Apple as well says this will be kept in a separate database. We will not use this information except for our own purposes, which they don't tell me what that is. All of this always starts out well. And let me be really clear. When we're talking about electronic databases that are in use, that have in them personal information, it is very, very rarely a computer problem that releases personal information. The systems that have been developed are actually very good at being able to bar people from getting access to a security level that they're not entitled to, et cetera, et cetera. If you're given a code or you're given as a certain level of individual, you should be given access to this level of information and no more. The computer systems are actually really good at that stuff. Consistently, where we have found a problem with these databases is human beings willingly, knowingly contravening the rules that are there and accessing those databases. And we've had a number of examples here very, very close to home. I live in Edmonton. We had an entire a terrible experience for everyone involved, including members of the Edmonton Police Service, where it was discovered that members of the police service had accessed information, including home addresses, and in fact had used it for surveillance on a member of the media and on an individual who was then Chief Commissioner of the Edmonton Police Commission. Shocking, and as shocking to members of the Edmonton Police Service as it was to members of the public, that information would have been accessed for reasons for which it was not collected. And then further, to find out, as people started to say, well, was my information looked at? And we have a very well-known defense attorney in town who went through the appropriate channels and found out that his information had been accessed literally dozens and dozens and dozens of times by different individuals, by the same individuals at different times. And to track his whereabouts, to track what he was doing, to get into his finances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we know these things happen. And that's my frustration. We are trying to create a good thing. We're trying to create a system by which we could find people who were missing, who may be in need of our help. That's a good idea, and the intent of that is good. But the effect of what I see that we've done in Bill 8 is that and a whole bunch of other things, in that we have also essentially, I think, criminalized law-abiding Albertans who either forget or aren't feeling well or make a conscious choice to not tell a bunch of people. No, we're on 8.
Yep.
Where they are, and as a result of that, according to this legislation, that can trigger the police services or the local police service under Section 3 to apply ex parte to a justice of the peace for an order to get access to an astonishing array of information from bank records, employment records, health records, GPS records, cell phone, et cetera, to track this person down. And that's a wonderful thing if you're trying to find a missing person. It's not such a wonderful thing if you're an individual who just decided to take off. It means that we're not allowed to do that in Alberta anymore because we in this Assembly passed a bill that said we're not going to allow Albertans to play hooky, to take off, to forget. And that's the part that I object to in this bill. I don't object to trying to do a good service and to try and find people who are missing and need help. And we just, as I said, we hear those. I came from the cafeteria downstairs, and as I went by, there was a bulletin board. There was a photo of a young man, and it just jumped out at me, and I stopped and went back and looked. I thought, boy, that's a very attractive young man. Well, there's a bias. Went back and looked at the poster and realized that it's a poster of the young man from the military that's gone missing recently in Edmonton. And you just have that little gasp of air when you go, oh no, that's just awful. And everybody feels that. So this is my struggle with this bill. It did what it needed to do, and then it did a whole bunch more. And that's my objection to the bill. I think the effect of the bill is that we haven't done enough to make sure that it's very clear that anyone who does access any of these records that can now be collected on an individual, if you access those and use them for a purpose beyond what they were intended for, the consequences will be severe. And I think that needs to be made very well known and needs to be put into practice far more often. Because at this point, it's worth it for people that want to be able to gain access that they shouldn't be gaining because they gain the information. That's what they want. Let me give you another well-documented example from health information where we had the other woman in a what do they call them, a love triangle, who was regularly accessing health information on her lover's wife's progress through cancer treatment to see how she was doing. Can you imagine what an invasion into the privacy of that woman is? Trying to survive cancer treatment is one thing, dealing with a family breakdown is another, and now to find out that a perfect stranger to her is regularly accessing her health records to see how she's coming along, or more likely how she's not coming along. That's what we know. And yet this bill did nothing to deal with what we know about what goes wrong in the system. So it's giving immense powers to the police to once again collect information.